Everybody, and welcome. It's Friday, so it must be Kinetics USA weekly show, Onwards and Upwards, everything that a healthcare worker needs to know about coming to live and work in the United States. I am your host, Tanya Friedman, CEO of Kinetics USA, the #1 company for bringing healthcare workers to the United States via direct hire. Today, please apply to Kinetics USA, and our team are online waiting for you to help you with your American dream. You can see our website on the screen in front of you. Today's topic is our question and answer with our legal experts. We are excited today to bring our legal experts into the room. We have Mike Hammond. Hi, Mike. Welcome.
Hi, Tanya. How are you?
Good to see you. Mike, where are your papers today?
I just got back from an event conference, so they're over on the side.
Oh, okay. Well, we're missing all your papers. We hope to see a very big deck behind, a whole forest behind you going forward.
I'll work on that.
Okay, so let's dig in. Mike, we have a lot of questions. My desk is full of questions, and I know we will have questions in the chat as well. Oh, and there we have Chris Musello joining us. Welcome, Chris.
Morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are.
Thank you for joining us. We have the dynamic duo, Chris and Mike. Good morning, Paul is saying to our lawyers, Mike and Chris. And I see we have Ofelisayo. I hope I've got that right, saying hi. Gina saying hi. If you're watching, I know there are viewers who watch from all over the world every Friday. Please put into the chat your name and where you're watching from. And if you have any questions for the legal experts, this is your time. In the next hour, we're going to be firing questions at our dynamic duo, and they're going to be sharing their insights and expertise. Okay, so let's get started. First question we always get, Mike, the visa bulletin. Talk to us about the latest visa bulletin.
Well, we're still current, everyone except for India and China, and no real surprises there. No significant surprise announcements relative to healthcare workers. India EB2 is potentially going to retrogress soon, but very few healthcare workers would be in that category. So I think for the short term, the visa bulletin is still looking good.
Okay, so good news, everybody. If you are watching the show for the first time and you have not yet passed your NCLEX, or if you're a medtech, you have not yet passed your ASCPI, please, this is the time to do it. As Mike just said, the doors are open, and there's no better time to come to the United States. Chris, we have a question from Nashwe. Nashwe is asking how long we need to wait after DQ to get an interview date. Some people are waiting for more than 4 months to get interview at the UAE. Can you let me know about this?
Yeah, I don't think 4 months is unfortunately that unusual in this day and age. The consulates are mainly, they've mainly worked through a lot of the backlogs that were delayed by COVID. The real, but the issues come down to the embassies themselves and consulates themselves, just how busy they are. But I don't think 4 months is unfortunately unusual now. So I wouldn't be concerned at all by 4 months. I think that's probably around the new average or new normal.
So Nashwe, I think patience is the answer there. We know it's frustrating. We know it's upsetting. We know it feels like you're waiting forever. But as Chris said, I think that the government is clearing up a lot of the backlogs that were caused by the pandemic. So we just have to wait, and hopefully you'll be in the United States soon. We have a question here from Katie, Mike, who's asking, up to what stage can I add my fiance for my DS-260? If his case is to follow, should I put it on my DS-260 application?
Well, a fiance is not going to qualify. You actually need to marry. So the key is going to be getting married and then add them. And depending on when you get married will depend, and what stage your case is in, will depend on the actions that you will actually take. But technically, as long as you're married before you actually achieve your green card, there are options for him, whether they be follow to join or a variety of other things, depending on what's faster. But you have to be married. Fiance is not sufficient.
Okay. Well, I mean, couldn't she come to the US and then bring her fiance? I mean, there's that show I love called 90 Day Fiance, Mike.
There is a show called 90 Day Fiance, and one of our former attorneys has actually been on that host several times with several clients.
Oh wow!
She was a client, right? Not a contestant on that show.
No, not a contestant.
Oh,
She's one of
okay.
the attorneys on the show. So
Okay.
you see Jessica on that show. She used to work with us. No, the fiance visa, 90-day K visa, is for U.S. citizens only.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. So Katie, I think you got good answers there, which will help you with your future. So best wishes for the wedding.
Yeah.
Okay, Becky is saying hi, Mercy saying hi, Shiny saying hi, Cleopas from Kenya. I have a question for Cleopas, Chris. I know that there's been some talk about the Kenyan consulate. Can you share any light on that? Because I know there've been a lot of delays at that particular consulate.
Yeah, we've seen the sub-Saharan, in particular Kenya, get backed up. I was on a conference call with the U.S. State Department maybe 10 days or so early last week. And they're aware of it, and I know they're working on it. But as with a lot of things in this process, I doubt it will be resolved anytime soon. And then, of course, the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks or so, I think Mike would agree with me. It's a time of the year when things just generally slow down. People are taking vacations, and therefore there's fewer embassy appointments available. But I'm hoping into the new year that Kenya in particular and some of the other places that have not moved up, like for instance, the Gulf countries have and the Manila has, I'm hoping that they will get going there. I know Kenya specifically, the embassy had made a focus family-based immigrant visas. So like green cards, like Mike was saying before, if a U.S. citizen marries a foreign national, not a green card holder, but if a U.S. citizen marries a foreign national, they can get a green card appointment. And I know in Africa they were prioritizing those because for 2 years or so during COVID, those cases just sat. But my sense is they're almost through that backlog in Kenya, and so into next year, I hope we'll get to a more realistic processing time.
Okay, good. So good news for Cleopas as well as anyone else from Kenya. Ricardo has a question, Mike. Good morning. How long is EAD and travel authorization taking? And perhaps, Mike, you can explain for those people who don't know, what is an EAD?
So if you're here in the U.S. and you're going through the green card process, you're going through something called an I-45 adjustment of status application. And as part of that application, you are permitted to apply for EAD, a work card, and something called advanced parole, which takes the place of your prior visa, whether that be an H-1 or a student visa, and allows you to travel internationally. Generally, those applications are processed together and issued in one card called a combo card that will look like a driver's license that will have your EAD and your AP on the exact same document. However, and the normal processing time for that is right now anywhere 4 to 6 months. However, if you're a healthcare worker, you have the ability to expedite the issuance of that EAD card. It will not expedite the issuance of the AP though. And so that can work to split your card up. So expediting may not be the best thing for you. So I think it depends on your circumstances. And they were just expediting renewals. And then maybe about 3 weeks ago or so, they announced that they were also going to expedite new cases. Right now, I haven't asked anyone how soon we're getting them, but as I understand it, the expedites are being granted. So.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. We have actually a related question here from Norma. Norma is asking, I had an adjustment of status green card, and I have my EAD card. I have to go for an interview. Does everyone with adjustment of status have to go for an interview these days? Chris?
No. Well, technically, yes. Everyone who goes for a green card appointment is supposed to go to an interview in the United States. For a long time, up until maybe 5 or so years ago, employment-based green cards, which is, of course, if you're a nurse or a healthcare worker in the United States, those interviews were waived. About 5 years ago, the U.S. government got rid of the waiver, which is to say that those employment-based green cards were going in for interviews. Then when COVID started, they reinstituted the waiver for most employment-based green cards. We haven't seen it at our office, very many employment-based green card interviews actually being called in the last, certainly in the last two or so years since COVID became a big deal, 3 years almost now, I guess. Having said that, if you're being called for a green card interview, that even as an employment investment, that wouldn't in and of itself give me concern. I think you may want to talk to your attorney to say, to see, is there something in your case that's a little unusual that might be triggering the interview?
Okay. All right. Good advice. And if anybody is going through the process of an adjustment of status green card, I would suggest you go to the Kinetics USA website and you can watch. We did a show on, the whole show was on the adjustment of status green card. And we also have a guidebook on our website, which is, free information that can help you through that process and what to expect step by step through the adjustment of status process. And we have one, by the way, for the consular green card as well as for the TN process. All right. Gina is from the UK is saying hi. Wycliffe is saying, we trust you. Thank you for the great work we're doing. So Chris and Mike, kind words. I have one question. How do you handle someone who's using asylum in a foreign country and has passed the NCLEX? Mike?
So the person is overseas and living in whatever country they're living in right now based upon asylum, or are they in the U.S. based upon asylum and they've now passed their NCLEX while they're in the U.S.? Any way we can get a clarification on that?
On that one. So Wycliffe, if you want to maybe put some notes in the chat and I'll try to get back to your question. Okay. I'm not even sure how to pronounce the first name, but I'll just call you Anne from Nigeria, Nana from Ghana. So fun to see everybody around the world. And Doki is saying, please can you explain the PWD current, Chris?
What was current? What was the question?
Please explain to us the meaning of PWD's current.
Well, there is no real phrase PWD is current, although I would imagine people are using that colloquially. So what happens is in the nurse green card process is the very first thing a new employer, which is to say an employer who has never filed for a nurse or at least hasn't recently filed for a nurse petition, what that employer has to do, whether it's a staffing company or a hospital group or a nursing home group or whoever the employer is, the first step that they have to do is they have to file a prevailing wage determination with the U.S. Department of Labor. That process right now is taking something like 7 or 8 months, and there's no expedite, there's no premium processing. There's nothing that can speed that up, and it's a shame because it really should take about 15 minutes is the reality. But nevertheless, so it takes 6 or 8 months. And either at the end of that process, after it's been certified or shortly before it's certified, there actually is a second step that the employer has to take, which is for most employers who are not union hospitals, they actually have to hang a notice, paper notice in the facility for 10 days, and then that has to come down for 30 days. So it's about a month and a half. In any event, that 7 or 8 month process has to be completed before any nurse's I-140 immigrant visa petition can be filed. So for hospital groups, staffing companies, et cetera, who regularly hire nurses, foreign nurses, this process, the prevailing wage process, sort of happens behind the scenes and is continually ongoing. And so therefore, anytime a new nurse is offered a position, it's usually pretty immediate that the immigrant visa application can be filed. Now, of course, the nurse and the recruiter and the law firm have to work through some paperwork and documents. So it's, and the filing is pretty thick. So, it may take a few weeks, but it can essentially be filed immediately. If a prevailing wage determination isn't current or what we would call certified, then you have to wait that 7 or 8 month period, which unfortunately just means that it's going to be a little longer until you get your green card. So that's the distinction between an employer who says they have a current PWD or certified PWD versus one who does not.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So that gives a really good explanation. We know that for many viewers, this is very confusing. There's a lot of terminology here. I know one nurse said to me the other day, it's like learning a different language. So I definitely would encourage you to watch again. If you're just joining the show now, I mentioned this before, please go to the Kinetics USA website and watch the show on the consular green card process, on the adjustment of status process. You can download the guidebooks, and this will give you clear outline of all the different steps in the process, what they mean, what the timing is, and how that would pertain to you as a healthcare worker. Okay. Nadia from Belize, Aska from Pakistan. Paul has a question. Mike, I think you touched on this. Maybe you can just elaborate. He's asking, is there possible retrogression in EB3 Philippines?
Sure. I don't think it's going to happen this fiscal year, but as retrogression occurs when demand exceeds the supply of the visa numbers. And there is a great demand for international workers, whether it be healthcare or in any other space for the U.S. And we're still working with rules set 30, 40 years ago as far as the numbers that have not really changed. And so the demand is simply going to ultimately exceed the supply. We had a short term over the last couple of years benefit from COVID. Because unused family numbers got passed over to the employment side. So we have gotten a few extra numbers. We even got a few extra numbers for this year, not significant, but several thousand, which is likely going to stem things off for this fiscal year. But certainly most of us, I believe, think that there will be retrogression unless there is some sort of legislative change. Chris is probably more up to speed on whether there's any potential legislative change that would strike that off, but I'm not terribly optimistic.
About the legislation or about
the
right? Yeah,
about legislation.
Okay.
No, I mean, Mike's got exactly right, including the lack of optimism. There was a quiet effort in September that we didn't really want to publicize, in which Senator Durbin actually tried to get the HWRA attached to a funding bill. But as with all immigration legislation, that's pretty difficult. We did have a new U.S. election here, I guess a few days ago, Tuesday. Some of the results of that election are still undecided as they're counting ballots, I guess. The expectation is that the lower house of Congress, which we call the House of Representatives here, that will be slightly Republican dominated body. The upper body, which is the U.S. Senate, that is going to be maybe Democrat, maybe Republican. Either way, it's basically going to be a 50-50, maybe 50+1 for the Democrats. The president, of course, is Joe Biden. He's a Democrat. He remains in office for 2 more years. The general rule of thumb is if it's divided government, which is to say we've got Republican in one of the bodies and Democrat in one of the bodies and or the presidency, that it's very tough to get legislation passed. Then you layer on top of it, in the U.S. anyway, immigration legislation is always very difficult. And so we're not terribly optimistic. Having said all that, you never know. And I know that the industry is still committed to working on something. And we, the industry, will be spending the next 2 months. The new Congress will be sworn in January, sort of coming up with a strategy for the 2023-24 congressional term.
Okay, so I think the bottom line really is we're not sure. Yes, the visas might be oversubscribed to in a year or so, but right now the doors are open. Right now, the visa bulletin is open. Mike is nodding his head. So right now is the time that if you're interested to come to the United States, you need to pass your NCLEX. We have on our website the Success Path. The Success Path really guides you through all the steps that you need to take in order to come and live in the United States and get to step number 7, enjoy and prosper. You will see there as a registered nurse, first step is the NCLEX. Preparing for the interview, and number 3 is that visa framework. So this is the piece that we're talking about, either coming on a consular green card, or if you're a Mexican or Canadian citizen, the TN visa. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So Mercy is asking, how long will it take to relocate after passing the NCLEX? So Mercy, I would assume that you're asking once you've got a job offer and accepted that job. Chris, how long is the process taking from filing to getting to the consulate right now?
Yeah, so assuming the case is filed under what's called the premium processing program, which in many cases are filed that way, we're seeing something like 3 weeks until the approval comes with the I-140, and then we have to go through the NVC process, which means getting people documentarily qualified, and then the appointment has to be set up. Depending on the embassy, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, something like that, from the I-140 being approved.
Okay, so there you go, Mercy. Now is the time. Oh, we have a quiz question. We want to see if everybody's paying attention. Anyone guess the answer to this question? Put your answers in the chat. The question here is, if it is a service offered by the USCIS that expedites the processing time for specialized employment-based green card petitions, such as the EB-3. Anyone guess what that expedite name is? If you know what it is, put it in the chat. There I see we've got Aisha's the first one in. Premium processing. Great. Marv, Sonia, I'm not sure of the name there. You got it, Aisha. It was premium processing. Well done. I see a lot of people now putting it in the chat. Aisha, you were quick. Good. Chris just said it, so we just wanted to make sure everyone was paying attention. Okay. All right. We have a question here from Jocelyn. Mike, Jocelyn says, I'm on completing my DS-260. In 2008, I had applied for an H-1 visa. Then during the interview with the consul, he asked me if I had relatives in the US, and I answered no, which in fact I do have. Is this a case of misrepresentation or fraud? Is there any way to clean my name or waive for it? She actually paid an attorney, but hasn't got the appointment yet. What is your opinion on that, Jocelyn? Mike?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, it potentially could be a problem. Anytime you lie to the federal government can be a problem. I think we'd have to know what ultimately happened on that H-1B. There's an argument that your lie was not material because the H-1B, whether you had answered yes truthfully, would have not impacted the issuance of that H-1B whatsoever, because the H-1B is not considered a non-immigrant intent visa. It's considered a dual intent, which means you can have relatives, you can have a spouse living in the U.S., a U.S. citizen spouse, and still get an H-1B. So you could argue that, hey, my lie was not material. My answer was irrelevant. But we'd have to find out what happened on the H-1B first, and then determine. And then you'd have to disclose it, what all happened as part of the H-1B, as part of any green card processing. So at the very least, you should expect some delay in the processing of your visa at the consulate.
Okay, so Justin, thank you for that opinion, Mike. And I think the rule of thumb always is don't lie when you are going, and we're working with the US government. Irene is asking, are you recruiting certified nursing assistants? Irene, the answer is yes, we are. Nana has a question. Please, what's the time? Lots of questions about timing today. What is the time frame for DQ after submitting my DS-260? I filled mine in on the 27th of July, and I'm still at DQ'd. Chris?
Yeah, again, we had this a little earlier. I don't think 4 months is unfortunately that unusual. So, and I think you're going to see even fewer appointments in the second half of November and December. So unfortunately, it wouldn't surprise me if you don't get your appointment until after the new year.
Okay. And so again, we just got to be patient. Catherine has a question. Mike, I have a concern regarding the choice of location I placed initially for my interview. I have selected U.S. Embassy Riyadh. However, my dependent is in the Philippines and I intend to have the interview for my son in Manila. What would be the effect of this? Would there be any issue? If ever, what would have been a better option for me so it won't be complicated in my case since I have problems with requesting a vacation to go for an interview in Manila? So I think essentially she's going to be in Saudi and her son is going to be in Manila. Do you see an issue with that?
Well, generally speaking, no, there's not issues in having, people split. There's also theoretically no issues with changing the embassy selection. However, whenever you make a change, you should expect two things to happen. Number one, there's going to be a delay, no question about it. And number two, you're not going to be able to determine how long that delay is going to be. Sometimes embassy changes go fairly smoothly and the delay could be, only several months. And other times you could be looking at 6, 8, 10 months of delay because of the change. But if you've already done it, if it's already filed, it's already been designated, you either have those two options: continue on with the course you've chosen, or deal with the delay. And I think it's a decision that obviously is a personal decision, but you also have to talk to your, recruiter and employer to make sure they have a certain expectation of what the plan is going to be, what the costs are going to be. And if you want to make this change, you're going to need to talk to them to make sure that you guys are aligned so that everyone's on the same page as to what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. So I think, though, the general rule of thumb is really to give some thought and some discussion to which consulate you're going to be going to or your family are going to go to before you actually move ahead with that decision, right? Because, any change that you make is going to cause delays.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Absolutely. And so you have to consider what are going to be my circumstances when I get to the point when I'm going to have this interview. Am I going to be allowed vacation? And am I going to be able to go? Is my family going to be here with me at that point in time? When's this going to occur? Is my contract in the UAE already going to be up? So I'm already going to be back in the Philippines. There's a whole lot of situations. I don't think the answer is always, I'm going to have the interview where I'm living at today. I think that may be the right answer, but there's certainly other factors to consider.
It's kind of on a case-by-case basis. So really important to have that discussion with your case specialist before you embark on that journey. Christina, I've got so many questions here and I'm watching the time. So if I don't get to your question in the chat, please forgive me. Our legal experts have said that they will go into the chat if we're not able to answer any questions to help anybody who's posted a question that I haven't been able to get to. But my desk is full of papers here. So I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. We have a question here from Katie. I would like to ask a question regarding my I-140 approval, Chris. My I-140 was filed in June 2022, and then I got an RFE. It's been 4 months already, and until now, no update. I want to know how long will an RFE be? RFE cases should be responded by the USCIS.
Yeah, it's impossible to say. So an RFE can come for almost any reason. So for instance, if the RFE said, please send us a copy of the nurse's passport page because the one that you've sent us is blurry, well, that can be responded to in however long it takes the nurse to send a PDF copy of a cleaner copy of the passport, the attorney to type out a very short letter and FedEx it or overnight courier it to the USCIS. Then maybe a week or two, and then it's only a week or two to respond. And if it's premium processing, as I know a bunch of you know, because I'm looking at the chats over here, that should be another 15 days, and the case should be approved. That'd be about as simple an RFE as you can get. the complexities can be enormous. And so it completely depends on the RFE and the basis of the RFE. And so the only way to really answer that is not this forum, but is to talk to your recruiter or your attorney or your employer to get a sense as to what the issue is and what kind of timing should be expected. If, and this wasn't quite clear from the question, the two other points, but one is the RFEs have to be responded within 87 days. However, for about 2 or 3 years since COVID, the U.S. government has issued a blanket extension of 60 more days, which makes it about 150 days. So what's that? 5 months, which means theoretically, if an RFE was issued today, November 11th, we might not need to file a response before roughly April 11th. Now, there's a reason the government gives that much time, and it's because sometimes they know that the documentation is complex. But again, if it's an example like my, blurry passport, you don't need to wait 5 months to respond. So that's one other thing to consider. Second thing to consider is if you're not under premium processing. So under premium, when the RFE is responded, the U.S. government will take 15 more days if the case is premium processing to issue the approval, hopefully. If it's not under premium processing, then ordinarily we see 60 days or so. But again, the last 2 or 3 years, that has been warped a little bit. And so, 4 months, I think, would probably be about at the outer bound. And so the part that I wasn't quite sure from the question was it that the RFE was responded 4 months ago, or that the RFE was issued 4 months ago?
Okay, so unfortunately, it just depends.
Yeah, I give this
is the short answer there. And I think for that question, really important to speak to your attorney and see how it pertains to your specific case. Okay, Luke has a question. How long does the ETA 9089 take to be audited? Mike?
So the ETA 9089 is a document that is associated with the PERM green card process that is not really relevant in the RN context or the PT context, but is relevant for other healthcare workers, such as med techs, CNAs, et cetera. The audit comes in after the PERM is filed with the government, with the Department of Labor. They've reviewed the case and they have questions. Their audit is similar to the USCIS RFE. It can also be an audit based upon randomness. There's just a certain number. One of the ways they audit cases is if there is a high unemployment rate of a particular worker class in the geography where you filed your case. So they want to know how your employer could prove that they have demonstrated a lack of qualified workers, which is part of the PERM process in such a economic conditions. When you get an audit in a PERM case, there's a limit of 30 days to respond to that. They do not have the extra 60 COVID days that the USCIS has that Chris talked about. So it's 30 days to respond. And then after the case is responded to, we'll see some back in 3 or 4 months if it was something fairly simple. If it's extensive, you could wait 8, 9 more months for an audit case. But we've not seen anything in quite a while over a year. So I would say under a year. Keep in mind, the priority date is retained throughout that because your priority date is established when your PERM is filed. And generally speaking, if you're doing a PERM case, unless you're doing it for CNAs, if you're a med tech or an OT in the US, you're already in the US, you're already working on an H1. So it's inconvenient that your case has been audited, but there's nothing you can do about it other than simply wait. You cannot file a new case while a case is under audit.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We have another quiz question just to check if everyone's paying attention.
I'm going to get this one.
If you don't, Mike, there's a problem.
Okay, Mike, when taking your NCLEX, if the blood pressure is over.
Mike is running out the door. Okay, so we're going to bring up another quiz question now. Let's see this one. This is the date that the USCIS has received your I-140 petition. Anybody guess, or not guess, you should know what the answer to this question is. If you know the answer to this question, put the answer. There we go. Aubrey got it. The answer is priority date. There we go. Aubrey was really quick. I see a lot of people also joining behind there, but Aubrey got it. Well done, Aubrey. All right, back to the questions. Janae said, I am married, but still using my single name in all my documents like passport and licenses. Is there a problem in processing the green card specifically? I am planning to bring my family with me. Chris?
No, you can have any name you want. Indeed, one of the sort of rules of thumb, it's not an official rule, but a rule I like to use is whatever name you're beginning the immigration process with, you should probably try and stay all the way to the end of the process with the same name. Changing the name, it's a little bit like Mike was saying about a half an hour ago about changing your city where you're going to process your interview. It's not that it's impossible, it's just that it causes confusion and delay. And so it doesn't matter that your spouse has a different surname than you, or for that matter, your children. In fact, for a lot of times, and this isn't a major point, but it is nice when the nursing license matches the passport, matches some of the other immigration documentation so that the names are all consistent. So, on balance, we like to keep the name the same throughout the length of the visa process.
Okay. But I mean, they would pick that up in the marriage certificate, right? So
yeah, that's right.
So that's where the officer would be able to see that. Okay, we have so many questions here, so I want to get through as many as possible. I'm watching the clock ticking. We have, Dr. Scotland is here, who is in San Diego, British, Aussie, US citizen here. Wow. Dr. Elissa, a world traveler. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so we have Aubrey is asking, and I think Aubrey's the one who actually got that question right. Hi, does Kinetics also process nurses who want to work in a clinic or home care? Aubrey, we do. So if you are interested in a specific setting, please apply to Kinetics USA website, and our team are online waiting to speak to you and see how we can help you. Mike, have you seen, Gina's asking, have you seen any issues with the London embassy or delayed interviews there at all? Chris or Mike, actually?
Not on the immigrant side. On the non-immigrant side, things are not quite as fast as they used to be. And, a lot of embassies are going to be just extremely slow between now and through the end of the year. But we've not seen anything on the immigrant side out of London.
Okay, so all good there. Izzy is asking, Chris, my spouse is currently in Texas with F1 visa, but he's my dependent and his case number is bearing Lagos. Can his immigration interview be done in US while he's currently studying, or can it be adjust?
I'm working on the presumption on this question, Tanya, that the nurse is overseas, the spouse. So one spouse is in Texas, one spouse is in, for argument's sake, Manila.
Yeah.
So the short answer is yes, the adjustment can be done here in the U.S. It's not difficult, but there are some subtleties in terms of travel and timing of certain things when they get filed. And so that's something I would definitely recommend you talk to a good immigration attorney about. Again, it's very doable. It's not even terribly complex, but you do need to be precise and you need to keep an eye on various travel dates and various timings of filings.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Mike Shiny has a question. My case expedited and reached to the consulate, but not yet completed DS-260 because invoice ID is not available. Who should I contact?
You should call Mike.
Yeah.
You want to delegate that one, Chris?
You should call Maria in Chris's office.
I just see the fingers pointing at each other.
She's about 5 days away from giving birth to her second son, so she may
Oh,
not
my
call you right
goodness.
back.
Yeah, so it might be a little delayed on your answer. Yeah. Anytime there's something that's went wrong with whether it be a fee bill or your DS or interview, anything like that that has gotten out of the ordinary is going to require some personal attention to get you back. So the first thing you have to really recognize is what's going on really out of the ordinary. So some of the things like, I've waited 2 months, I don't have this, that's not enough time. That's not out of the ordinary. I didn't receive this as fast as my friend received it. Well, the processing times vary a lot. So we have to first determine, are you really out of the ordinary? And then secondly, what actions have to be taken to try to get you back on path? And there's a lot of things that can work. There's a lot of things companies and lawyers try to start with. And almost all of them take longer than we would like. So we can put in simple requests, depending on whether it's at the National Visa Center, the NVC, or at the consulate, or the issue is back with the USCIS. But I would start with your case manager and then let them escalate it up. But the bottom line is, when things get off track in this process, they rarely get back on track quickly. They always get back on track. There will be a resolution. Your problem will be solved, but it will not be solved quickly. That's, I think, generally what happens when there's been anything that's unusual that's happened.
Okay, so Shiny, I know that it's probably very stressful and very frustrating for you, but the reassurance, I think, is, as Mike said, it can and will be resolved. It's just going to take some time. And I think that goes for anyone who can see that they've got some kind of an issue which is more unusual.
Hey, Tanya, let me interrupt just for a second.
Yeah.
The person that asked the question at the very, very beginning about asylum has provided the additional information.
Yes, I was getting there. Thank you.
Okay,
Mike.
So great.
Yeah,
We'll
no. You're ahead of the game, Mike.
Was that Chris's question or was that my question?
I think it was it yours, Mike?
I think it was mine. Sorry about that, Chris. Yeah.
Okay.
So
go ahead and answer, Wycliffe.
Yeah. So the individual's scenario is they're on asylum in a country, not their country of birth, but that's the country that they're in asylum at. They passed NCLEX and they want to know about coming to the U.S. So a couple things. First of all, the U.S. consulate, as long as you're legally in the country you're in, is going to entertain your visa application. So there's no problem the fact that you happen to be in South Africa on an asylum status for the U.S. consulate in South Africa to process your visa. Second thing is you're still going to be charged in the priority date category back to your country of birth. So your country of birth is still going to be relevant. The practical issues I think you're likely going to have are, what do you do for a passport? Are you still eligible for a passport from your home country? Is there are you eligible for a travel document that may take the place of a passport under one of the UN refugee rules? So there might be some things there, but generally speaking, your immigration process is going to look the same as anyone else who happens to maybe working on a work visa in South Africa or something else like that. So it can definitely be done. It'll be a little more complicated. Let your case manager know up front that that's your circumstance. But I do not foresee any significant problems.
Okay, there we go, Wycliffe. So Wycliffe's in my home country, South Africa. So shout out to beautiful South Africa. Okay, Kala from Jamaica. My PD is 6th of September 2022, but still my petition has not moved to the National Visa Center. Do you have any idea of what's going on at the USCIS? Chris, this is very frustrating. We have even some nurses who've had earlier priority dates where their cases have not moved to the National Visa Center. I know there was an issue earlier in the Texas Service Center earlier in the year. So what to do in this kind of circumstance? Because it does.
There's nothing the nurse can really do. There's very little the attorney or the employer can do, but there is a little bit that they can do, which is if the employer and the lawyer notice that the case is just stuck, as Mike says, it takes a lot to get those cases unstuck. They do get unstuck. It just takes a while. There's two basic concepts that we use. First, if the case was filed premium processing, we will try to email the premium processing service to make sure that the case was moved from the Texas Service Center, or for that matter, any other service center, to the National Visa Center. So that's one idea, and that's usually where we start. And sometimes the premium processing center is helpful, and other times they just simply say, well, we send it to the National Visa Center, and we're moving on. Inquiries at the NVC are harder, which is why the second usual attack that we will take is if the employer has contacts with their local congressional office. If the congressional office puts in a call, that usually gets people at the USCIS and or the National Visa Center to lean forward and look for the case. They're not going to move immediately, but that sometimes helps nudge the case along. So those are two tactics that we might use in a situation like that.
Okay. And just one thing also clear, we did have some cases with one of our clients, and this is just heartbreaking to me because I know we've had some nurses who are just so frustrated where they get stuck. It's an issue on the government side. One other thing also that we have done successfully at Kinetics is to work with the hospital's government affairs department,
right,
and work with the local congressman or senator's office, and they can flag the cases and get those cases unstuck, as Chris has said.
Yeah,
so the good news
we've worked with you guys on that, I know.
Yeah. So, as Chris said, this is incredibly frustrating, especially when you see some of the people that had been filed the same time as you and their cases are kind of just smoothly going through and then yours is stuck. But the good news is that it does get unstuck. It just takes time, and we have to work on a lot of different avenues to try and resolve the problem.
Right.
Akbar is a nurse and have passed the NCLEX. Congrats, Akbar. So please apply to Kinetics USA, and we'd love to help you find your dream job. Maine has a question. I have a question regarding change of citizenship after the interview. What if there's a change of citizen, Filipino to British, after the U.S. immigrant visa has been approved using the Philippine passport, Mike?
So you now have your visa, green card stamp, visa stamp was in your Filipino passport. And between the time of getting that stamp and arriving in the U.S., you became a British citizen. So now you have a British passport. So you're going to carry both passports with you for entry. But from an immigration perspective, other than it potentially be, a little confusing, I would probably take your paperwork with you in addition to both passports at point of entry. I do not perceive that there should be any problem.
Okay, good. No problem is good. Laxmi also has passed the NCLEX. Congrats, Laxmi. Please let us know if we can help you at all. Apply to Kinetics USA. Okay, I think some of these questions we have already answered. Let me see here. Fabine has a question. If you work in an English country, how would it work with the English exam? So Fabian, this is a good question. If you were trained in English and are one of the listed countries by CGFNS that is exempt from the English, then you will not have to take the English exam. For those of you who were not trained in English or do need to take the English exam, the good news with Kinetics USA is we have what's called the Kinetics Care Package, which is that we pay for a review course. This is our way of paying it forward for nurses. And we pay for a review course for you. And we've had incredible success results. Just last month in October, we had 130 nurses pass the IELTS exam. We offer IELTS, NCLEX, PTE. We offer NCLEX as well, but IELTS, PTE, and OET classes. And this is paid for by Kinetics, and we've had phenomenal results. So that is good news for anybody who needs to take an English exam. Okay, I'm just trying to see what other questions we have here. Okay, we have a question here from Chris. Chris is asking, after receiving our green card, can my dependent, husband and child, go back to the Philippines for a vacation? And is there a time limit where they need to be back in the US, Chris?
So yes, they can absolutely go back to the Philippines. Certainly a few months is totally fine. If it's going to be more than about 6 months, we recommend you do talk to an attorney for two reasons. One, once you get over about a year, there could be issues about whether you've abandoned your U.S. permanent residency. But two, there are things that an attorney can do, and this is why I want to discuss your specific situation, to preserve your permanent residency. And then the third consideration to think about is, I know a lot of U.S. permanent residents, one of their goals in 5 years is to apply for U.S. citizenship. And one of the rules is you do have to be a green card holder for 5 years. There's a second rule that governs the amount of time that you are physically on U.S. soil, which is 2.5 years or 50% of the time. And so if you're interested in U.S. citizenship someday, you want to factor that into your thinking as well.
Thank you, Chris. And we actually have a show coming up about citizenship, how to apply for citizenship, and we'll have a few nurses on that have gone through the citizenship process. And I can tell you, as an immigrant who is now a proud American citizen, this is the ultimate goal. So watch out for that show because it's coming up in a few weeks. Sonia has a question, and I think this is probably going to be one of the last questions that we can take, Mike. This is a question that comes up pretty often. I have a question. Why don't Indian nurses get jobs in the US? Is there any other way to get into the US? So I think for an Indian-born nurse, Mike, is the question.
Yeah, so the reason why is because there's such a really long line of Indian nationals seeking to immigrate to the US. So the priority date line is back multiple years. I think Tanya put up the visa bulletin earlier on the show, and I was just looking. India, the EB3 category is April 2012 is where the line is. You had to be in line before April 2012. And that line does not, you can't go, well, today it's 2022, therefore it's only 10 years in line. 10 years in line is too long to wait for a hospital to say, we're going to sponsor this worker and they'll be here in 10 years. And the reality is it's not 10 years. That is likely to be significantly longer. The reason why there's such a long line is because of all the IT workers and engineers who come from India, who are here on visa statuses and then get in line. And they're obviously disturbed by the fact that they're in a big long line. And it has a lot of terrible unintended consequences for children and things like that. But they know they can stay and work legally while they're in that 10 or 15 year long line. So the reality is simply that the way the visas are allocated and split by country, there's a limitation on each country, creates a line. And the India line, other than a very short period of time, back in, I don't know, Chris would know for sure, 2004, 5, 6, somewhere in that, where we had a special category for RNs. But other than that, there's been a line. It is unlikely that's going to change unless some of the legislation that Chris talked about earlier that would exempt healthcare workers from going through all the same rules as everyone else. And if that happened, then it would open it up to India again.
Okay,
but
thank
right
you.
Now it's not.
Thank you, Mike, for giving that update. And we certainly hope that there will be some legislation change specifically for Indian nurses, because I know there are a lot of Indian-born nurses who want to come to the United States, and it's very frustrating to have this roadblock. Okay, so last few questions. James has a question. Do you provide support like housing, assisting with opening of an account, buying a car, helping with Social Security, orientation when the individual has settled? So this is not really an immigration question, but in answer to your question, James, yes, we do. If you look on the Kinetics USA website, we have our circle of support. Our circle of support are all the different ways that we circle around you to support you, and you will see there are lots of different avenues that we offer to help you through the transition timeframe. So things like we have a Kinetics Angel Network. This is a mentorship program. Nurses who have arrived a while ago help newly arrived nurses. We have the Kinetics Clubhouse. We are the only company who do all of these things. We have the Kinetics Clubhouse, which is a monthly get-together where we share with nurses how to navigate working in the United States. So, how to pay your taxes, how to get credit history, how to rent an apartment, how to the spouse to get in a job, lots of different resources and avenues, bank account, car information, lots of information to help you through that transition. All right, Doki says, can I add my 3-month-old child to the I-140 petition without his passport but birth certificate is available, Chris?
You should get the baby a passport. And whether you add it at the I-140 stage or the NVC stage doesn't matter too much. But at this point, I'd focus on getting the baby a passport, because without the passport, she's not going to go anywhere.
Okay. So there you have it, Doki. Devin, this is the last question. Mike, Devin is asking, my DQ was on June 2021 until now waiting for the visa interview, whereas my colleagues, April 2022, DQ at UAE, they got their interview in September 2022, also got their visa. So I think that the question from Devin, which is, it happens, is where they see friends or colleagues that are moving through the process quicker than they are. Mike, any comment for Devin or anyone else who's experiencing this challenge?
Well, I actually think that the math, April to September and June to November, would be the same. So I'm not sure that you're really behind your colleagues. Obviously, we have year-end.
Sorry to interrupt, Mike. It's June 2021.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. June. He has a DQ from June of 2021.
Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then there's obviously something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
No one should be waiting a year and a half for an appointment. And if you've been DQ'd and waiting a year and a half, that would be clearly unusual. And so you need to talk to your case manager, who will talk to the lawyer, who will try to figure out a solution for you. But a year and a half is clearly not normal.
Yeah. Okay. So good advice there, Mike. And we know that that's frustrating, but sometimes we do find that nurses will compare their cases moving through quicker than their colleagues' cases. And this does happen depending on sometimes the consulate you go to, and, there can be various other factors. So patience is the answer. All right, last question. Barry is asking, sorry, this is not related to immigration. Do you have any employers hospital-based for Las Vegas, Nevada? The answer, Barry, is yes. We have many. So if you are interested, please apply to Kinetics USA. We have opportunities in every state, both hospital as well as long-term care, home care, clinic. We have allied needs, so lots of opportunities. With that said, we are at the end of the show. Before you leave, please just a word about upcoming shows. On Onwards and Upwards, we have a lot of upcoming shows every Friday, 7 a.m. Pacific time. Check the time in your country. I saw we had a question about medtechs in the chat, so please watch next week, because the entire show is about medtechs next week. On the 25th, we have Thanksgiving. At Thanksgiving show on the 2nd, we have a license endorsement question and answer with the expert team from Kinetics USA and from O'Grady Payton, which is our sister company in the AMN family. On the 9th, we have a show about nursing students. On the 16th, our expert legal panel will be back for the US Q&A, and we're going to be talking about citizenship. 23rd, Christmas show, and on the 30th, we have the best onwards and upwards moments of 2022. Also, the Fora talk show, we have Next Generation NCLEX. This is going to be a big change in the NCLEX, so watch out for that. And on the 13th of December, clinical differences in MedSurg, working in MedSurg here as opposed to overseas. The Kinetics College, also free information every Monday on PTE, NCLEX, IELTS with our wonderful partners, Swoosh, iPass, Niners. and Aspire also do great classes. So please keep watching for that. And last but not least, the Kinetics Initiatives. Just a reminder to everybody, we have a free English scholarship with Kinetics Pay as the Kinetics Care Package for your English course, and we've had phenomenal results with that. We also have an NCLEX scholarship program for selected nurses. We have our $1,000 referral fee, which has been extended until November 30th. Listen to our podcast, Nursing in America. We have direct hire nurse aid programs, Onwards and Upwards, Kinetics College, and our allied needs as well. So thank you everybody for joining us. If I did not get to your question, I apologize. Thank you to Chris and Mike, the dynamic duo. It was fun to share this hour with you, and we look forward to next time. Have a great
Tanya, you guys have more content than Netflix, I think.
Thank you, Chris. I will take that as a compliment. We want to help. We just want to help.
And cheaper.
Yeah, that's for sure. No subscription.
Right.
There you go.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a nice weekend,
Onwards and
everybody. Good to
upwards.
see you, Mike. Good to see you, Tanya. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.